Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Hines on Air, your weekly dose of inspiration, motivation, and real-life entrepreneurial stories. I'm Matt Hines, your host, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey. From building a successful law firm to venturing into other industries like real estate and social media, I've experienced both the triumphs and the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. I've learned firsthand the importance of resilience, adaptability, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. On Hines on Air, we're diving deep into the world of business, law, and personal growth. Join me as I chat with incredible guests who have faced adversity, defied expectations, and achieved extraordinary success. We'll discuss their strategies, their mindset, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply someone looking for a little inspiration, Hines on Air is for you. Remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review whenever you listen to podcasts. Your support helps us reach more people and continue sharing these incredible stories. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody. It is Matt Hines. We are back with another Hines on Air. We've got another great show for you. A super interesting gentleman has joined us today, Mr. Deric Gillard. He is a very accomplished journalist, but he's also worked with numerous presidential appointees, successful organizations. He's just done a lot in a lot of different areas, really helped the planet overall. So we are pleased to have Mr. Gilliard join us. Mr. Gilliard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it, and please call me Deric.
Deric, all right, I'll do that. So you doing well today?
I am. Just turned 70 earlier this week, and so, doing a lot of reflecting and a lot of thankful for so much that I have going on. But yes, I'm doing well. Looking forward to some turkey in a couple days.
Yeah, all right. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right, man. Well, listen, when I see the word journalist and with your experience in that area, a common issue that's being discussed right now on social media, on podcasts and everything is what is the role of that's called legacy media, the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all that versus podcast shows and stuff like that. Do you have an opinion on where that's headed?
Sure. I think that there is one of the big problems in our society. I see this as somebody who is trained in journalism, had to go through, tons of classes, and a lot of it was about ethics, to be perfectly honest. They call journalism the fourth estate because of the impact it has on our society. And one of the problems is, and that, not pointing to any specific ones, but in much of our social media, people can kind of come on and say anything as fact and go in any direction. And there are no, kind of like we talked about politically, if there are no political guardrails, if there are no guardrails in terms of media, then I do think that is a real problem because some people, they just, they're really talking heads, but they don't have what I think is significant in terms of what they feel is, can and can't be said, shouldn't be, and what truth is, to be perfectly honest. So, but I do appreciate the fact that now people having podcasts and other, avenues, opens up a lot. I just wish that it's almost like with AI, AI, there are a lot of really wonderful, beautiful things about AI, but I think there's some dangers inherent in AI as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's interesting you say that a lot of the classes that you take coming up through in journalism school deals with ethics. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. I've never.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And particularly, I think it's that way. Certainly it was when I was in school in the 70s, particularly around print journalism, because you didn't have all these other things going on then. There weren't any podcasts and a bunch of radio shows. And so it really was about, the printed word. And so, but a lot of people who you think about it now, who have talk show hosts, in several different, markets, these people are not at all journalists. They come from a political lane, or they come from, some other lane, but they don't have any their training in journalism is kind of how to appear and how to sound online, but it has nothing to do with an educational background and an undergirding that, grounds you in certain, facts and certain philosophies and certain basics.
Well, when you see somebody like, I think it's Joe and Mishka Scarborough, the MSNBC guys, they catch some heat right now because they talk such bad about Trump, and then they went to meet him, and which I think was actually a very good move. They should go meet the guy and have a conversation with him instead of just demonizing him. But they don't seem, not just them, but when I see personalities like that on cable TV, I don't see much of an ethical code being followed. I kind of see an agenda or maybe just a personal opinion and a no-holds-barred approach or attack in that direction. Do you think the ethics guidelines and stuff that you studied and seem to uphold, do you think that applies, or do you think they care in normal media?
I think that, and those are exactly some of the kind of people I'm referring to. And, I conversely would point to the people on Fox, certainly. But I tell you this, I say, and I'm fine with people, you go in and, these people are expressing their opinion. If we know that going in, that's fine. But I still think your opinion should be based in some fact, because a lot of people, that's where they get their information from. And if you believe this but you don't, follow it up or check on, you don't fact check essentially, then you find a lot of issues. And certainly they came out hard against the president, and I'm glad they're meeting with him. I wasn't aware of that. I think that a lot of times, I wonder if they knew him before, because certainly they're very opinionated on it. But, I think that, that's one of the problems. If we can get people to sit down and have conversations, we see them a little differently. It doesn't change their politics. It doesn't change their priorities, but hopefully we can see more of the humanity in each other.
That's what I like about podcasts, is you get to see that side of people, in my opinion. In the short little 20-minute interview on Fox News or CNN or whatever, I don't know. I don't feel I've truly got the message. But when Patrick Bet-David or Rogan or one of these guys sits down for a few hours and they just chat, to me it's a good conversation. Normally, to me that's when whether you like him or not. I'm not speaking for or against him, but after Trump's debate, it was horrendous, we all know. And then he started touring on these podcasts. He went to Rogan. He went to PBD. I think Andrew Schultz was one. And he sat down and just chatted with the guys. And he'd tell you kind of stories from the 2016 presidency and other things. And I was like, now that's good. That sounds good. But when you get these little snippets from the news where he's, being angry about something or going off of it, I was like, it's not appealing. But anyway, it is nice to just hear somebody talk, have a conversation.
I agree with you there. I'm not a fan of the president, but I thought that was a stroke of genius to go on that show. It's my understanding it's the most popular show out there and really speaks to young men, young white men in particular. And I think that the Democrats and I'm not a Democrat, but me included, a lot of people misunderstood or gauged the impact that had. And I know he did a lot of that. So stroke of genius. He is a marketing genius. I don't think anybody anywhere could ever take that away from him.
Yeah, that's right. There was one conversation I remember a while back. This was with Howard Stern. And Howard liked Hillary Clinton. And he invited her on the show. But, Howard's got that reputation where the shock jockey's going to talk about sex or something crazy on there that, a respectable politician doesn't want to talk about. And he was like, no, I just wanted to talk to her. And they were like, well, do you think that made a difference in the campaign? And he's like, well, here are the numbers. We've got like 50 million listeners, and each car we think has at least an average of 2 people. So there's 100 million people. And he said, if a fraction of those would have heard the person and said, wow, she's really not that bad, and changed their minds, it could have changed the vote. So, yeah, I agree, though.
Absolutely. Especially considering that she was considered kind of a cold person by a lot of people, not somebody that, just endeared people. Very accomplished, right? But, so you're right. In hindsight, hindsight's 2020, right? A lot of people will be dissecting that election forever, and certainly the one a month ago forever too. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, good deal. So one of the things I read on your bio, it says you've worked with political appointees in the Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden administration. So then you got a whole lot of experience with government, right?
I do.
When it says you work with the appointees, what does that mean?
So my role was the public affairs advisor for the regional director. So there's a regional director appointed. There's 10 regions across the country. Here in Atlanta is the headquarters for all of the regional directors in Region 4. And so all of the departments, from HUD to EPA to education, all of them, transportation have an office. Most of them are located in the Sam Nunn Atlanta Federal Center downtown, right at 5 Points. And so my boss, the regional director, who I reported directly to, reports directly to this is responsible to the secretary as a secretarial appointee. And his or her role was to manage the 8 southeastern states. So that's the largest region, not necessarily, maybe not geographically, but you think all the way up from Kentucky, down to Florida, and then you have South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. So it's a very broad region, very diverse, in a lot of ways. A lot of rural areas. So yeah, that's kind of what I meant, is my role was to help that person, with the messaging, whatever the secretary's priorities were, they were our priorities, and all of our work was built around those priorities. And my job was to help in terms of media placement, in terms of getting he or her out in front of the right community organizations, our partners throughout. And that's what I mean by that.
Okay. And so the president would set an agenda, or, what they thought was important, tariffs, taxes, whatever it might be, COVID mandates or stuff. And they'd tell the Southeastern director, all right, this is what I want y'all to get out. And so your job's to sort of PR that message, to make it acceptable and agreed upon by the population.
Correct.
Okay. Wow. Okay. What kinds of media would you use? Would you set up interviews, or did you use social media, or what?
So it's interesting. Now, I never used social media until Donald Trump came into office. By then, what was I? I was in my early 60s. It's kind of late to get started, but I had to, because as you know, that was his number one form of communication. And so I had to learn Twitter, and in every other region, basically I had a counterpart. So I had 4 states coming up into the Trump administration. I had four states, and my colleague had 4 states. And she said, well, look, I'm not doing this. I'm out. So I got the 8 states. And so every other region, I think at that time, had 2 of me. And I had the biggest region, but just 1 of me. So my hands were full. But yeah, I would set up, sometimes it would be, occasionally it would be something with an editorial board, say with the Charlotte Observer or, Lexington Herald. But a lot of it was what they would send us. Then my role would be to disseminate it. And then if we got calls from media, then my job would be to work with them on talking points, and have to coordinate that with DC, because depending on who was in charge, which president, some of them gave you more leeway, some of them gave you less leeway. But also then setting up radio interviews and newspaper placements about any number of things. I forget, giving an example, in the Trump administration, one of their big focuses was the opioid epidemic. So we would visit a lot of places that had some of them were treatment centers, some were recovery systems, some used something called MAT, which is medically assisted treatment, and some of them, a lot of the Christian organizations were very much opposed to that. Did a lot of work around placing of foster children in adoption homes, and so just different things. With every different administration, there were different priorities. And so a lot of it would be, even sometimes it would be go on a trip where we visited a lot of those places and then coming back and writing and placing stories about that. So yeah, but then some of it was, when something would go wrong and people are calling, wanting a response. And in those instances, in most of the time, we would have to go to DC because they wanted to keep that tightly kind of controlled and vetted.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever, I'm going to put you on the spot, and this is being recorded so we can edit anything you don't like. Did you ever have a message from a president that you just disagreed with? You're like, geez, I do not want to push this crap.
Oh, a lot of times. And specifically in the Trump administration, but there were sometimes I disagreed with every single president. Let me say that. Every one of them. But that one, and I'll give you the main one I will talk about. Well, two, in terms of the Trump administration. One was I knew that COVID was a real big deal because we had been preparing for it for a long time. A year earlier, my executive officer had gone to DC, and they were doing like tabletop exercises around, basically pandemic circumstances, and so we knew that something was happening, and so I was very distraught by the fact that the administration wasn't taking it more seriously, because he said it's just going to disappear into the air and it's not going to be that bad. And so that was something that was really problematic for me because I knew that people were dying unnecessarily. And secondly, I would say, in particular in this administration, was the focus on starving or destroying or overturning, replacing and repealing the Affordable Care Act. Because we had put 6 years in terms of building that and putting it in place, and to see it being called everything but the devil's spawn was, pretty difficult to deal with. So, I had no choice but to, if they said send something out, I would send it out, but then I would get reaction many times from media that was very scornful of some of the things because essentially they knew it was not true. So those were some of the things, a couple of the examples that were really difficult for me.
COVID.
Let's unpack that.
Let's unpack the COVID one because I'm on the other side of the COVID aisle. Now, I don't disrespect that there was something wrong. My wife's father died from COVID. He lived in Ecuador, and their hospitals and their whole health system is horrible, and that led to it. But I respect the fact that there was something wrong that needed to be dealt with. With that said, though, I hear of what appears to me to be suppressing other treatment possibilities. Ivermectin was mentioned. As a matter of fact, YouTube just took us down several podcasts ago because we mentioned this. I don't know what they'll do with this one. But there were hydrochloroquine. There were some others that were suppressed. It appeared to be. There were college professors, well respected, who were fired because they disagreed with COVID. There was pretty strong information that suggested death certificates were doctored to make COVID look more serious than it was. So you take all that and others, pharmaceutical profits and all, and I got suspicious. Do you think the message and the mandates and all that were the proper approach? to handling the problem, or do you think the government overdid it, or would you have changed anything?
I'm sure I would change several things. And as I mentioned, the first would be to take it seriously. I understand people wanting a choice. Okay. So I see the controversy in somebody saying, if you're going to work here for me, when these vaccines become available, you're going to need to get a vaccine if you're going to keep working here. I see the pushback in that. I also see that where employees, this is like a right to work state, right? And so that's one of the issues that was a real issue. And to be perfectly honest, Hines, a lot of people absolutely do not want to be told what they can and can't do. I mean, let's just be real about it. That was a huge issue. I researched this exceedingly in detail about the impact of COVID, particularly in these 8 southeastern states, and where we have the most poverty in this part of the country. We have the most illiteracy. We have the highest rates of uninsured because the vast majority, 7 of our 8 governors absolutely refused to expand Medicaid. I'll tell you this, our Governor Kemp, he talks about having a $10 billion surplus, and he brags about it. But in my opinion, you're balancing this budget on the backs of the working poor. And a lot of times these are black and brown people, and they're and poor white people. And so, but our economy would shut down if we didn't have people who do these kind of jobs. And so I personally, Dr. King said the greatest inhumanity to man is the lack of providing health care. Now, because before I went to work for HHS, I worked as communications for King, director for Dr. King's organization. And justice is at the center of, who I am and what I think is, even as a Christian, justice is at the center of the Bible. And I'm an evangelical. And, that's the base of President Trump's support. I think that there are always going to be some anecdotal examples of people who took the shot and died, people who really got sick. There are a few of those, certainly. But if you look at, one of the problems I think hides at this point in time, we've gotten to be a nation where we don't trust anybody or anything. There was a time we trusted science. We don't trust science anymore. And, you and me, we have no medical training, So, I've worked, I'm a social scientist. I've worked in this arena for a long time, but, and I was skeptical about getting the shots initially, particularly because of the way I'm just being honest, Black people have been taken advantage of by our medical system. Tuskegee is just one very small example, but there are many where people were, the person that founded Mercer, as a matter of fact, that doctor that used, Black people as guinea pigs. And so in my opinion, and I believe the science, goes along with this, all those things, invectamine and hydroxychloroquine, all those things are not effective. And so we either believe the doctors, the medical profession, and part of the problem, I think also, Hines, was the CDC was being muzzled. They couldn't be honest about what they knew, and they had to go along with what the president said. And so that's, we lost at least 300,000 people that didn't have to die.
You say there's 2 things I actually want to follow up with you on. But on that point, you said the CDC was muzzled.
Yeah.
What were they trying to say that they weren't allowed to say?
They were trying to say that we needed to put safeguards in place. They were trying to say that this was a very serious disease. It was not just going to disappear into the air. They were trying to say that social distancing, the shots. There's some controversy over how effective the masks were. I will grant you that. They were trying to say that this was the biggest health threat to our country in a century. And the president, the leader of the free world, wasn't taking it seriously. So to me, the onus felt on the medical. The CDC was the most respected medical unit in the entire world. I think they lost a lot of that during COVID because Robert Redfield was not speaking his truth, the truth that he, as an epidemiologist, he knew the threat that disease caused and we were faced with, but he was not allowed to say. There was a guy up there, I'm trying to remember his name right now, who, Michael Caputo in the administration was very active up there. He was their public affairs person. Okay. So he worked in my lane, but just at 10 stratospheres higher. He was censoring what the CDC was saying. He has no medical background, no medical training, but the messaging, because it was all about keeping the economy flowing and strong during COVID. And to be perfectly honest, there was collateral damage, and I don't think that the administration was concerned about the collateral damage.
See, I thought the CDC did have that message, that they were telling us how. As a matter of fact, I'm a CDC skeptic, so I think we're on opposite sides. You and I have met for the first time today, and I respect everything you're saying, but I think we've got two different viewpoints on some of these things, which is nice, which is good. There's one thing I want to follow with you on. You said earlier that you and I don't trust science anymore. Do you think that's a well-founded, or justified, or do you think that's irrational?
I think it's largely irrational. There are instances. Again, there was a black doctor, a black physician, very well known, respected. I think she was in Indianapolis. She was telling her doctor what her symptoms were and how she knew she was not. He dismissed her. And I think, for example, there are a lot of cultural competency issues, Matt, in terms of, there are a lot of people who don't want a black doctor, a lot of people who don't respect black doctors. I'm just using that as an example. But overall, look, we have to trust somebody, right? And I think I believe in getting a second opinion. If you don't think your doctor is being responsive to you, you go find somebody else if you need a third opinion. But these people spend so much time being trained to do what they do. So I give you this example. So when we had, what was it? It wasn't I think maybe it was a Spanish flu 100 years ago, maybe 105 years ago now. This huge pandemic, worldwide pandemic, when the doctors, had this shot for it, people lined up. There's pictures in New York City of people in lines for miles. Nobody resisted going and getting this shot and getting this treatment because people believed in the science of medicine then. They trusted people. But now, partly because, what did Kellyanne Conway say? Alternative facts, what is true. And so if you can't count on people, particularly people who lead you, that you can believe them when they say something, we're going down a deep, steep rabbit hole, aren't we?
It's tough. I know. It's tough. Once you got pharmaceutical executives sitting on the board of the FDA and everything's so commingled, and I think corruption, I think it's just horrible. But I know they tried to clean it up, but it's not cleaned up. So it is hard to know who to trust. It's a shame it's like that. I think that Spanish flu example you just gave, the corporations hadn't taken over everything, and a doctor could just speak on his own and not worry about the vested interest coming down on him. I'm guessing. Right now, when somebody says, when the vaccines were pushed like they were, it just smelled bad to me. And that might be irrational or it might be justified. I was like, this is just odd. Like, my wife's vaccinated. I'm not. And she wanted to get vaccinated, and it made her feel better. And I'm like, that makes sense. Let's do it. No problem. But
And you didn't trust it. And, I mean, the beautiful thing about being in America, Hines, that I love, you can, it's your decision, you can, be right or be wrong. And I tell you, and I hope you get my book, because if you read the stories of these, and a lot of them are conservative people who swore up and down the vaccine was terrible, it was wrong, etc. And then several of them died, and new people who died. And then you have these deathbed regret stories. And so a bunch of people go to a funeral, they're all commingling and, no mask. And then, lots of them got sick. Several of them died. There's just a lot of these examples. And we don't trust the right people. Everybody has to trust somebody. I had to convince my sister, who's in a little town in Nebraska, that she needed to, and because she was very distrustful. Some of it is, I listen to everybody. I listen to Fox, to MSNBC. I listen to News Nation, to NBC. I mean, there's sometimes I can only take so much of anything, but a lot of people only listen to one lane, and so you don't get anything else. And so, I think that's a problem.
Well, Mr. Gilliard, listen, I'm about out of time, but I can't resist. I see, let me see, you mentioned Health and Human Services earlier, and I think earlier, let's see, you're a public affairs advisor to the Health and Human Services regional directors of the 8 southeastern states. Okay, so we kind of talked about that. Now, I have another strong suspicion that you and I are going to be on opposite sides of this question. What do you think about RFK Jr. for that spot?
Well, he's a conspiracy theorist, right? He, again, has no medical background, none at all, none. What kind of rational sense does that make to put somebody? He's an anti-vaxxer. He's an anti-chlorine person. Let me make this prediction to you. 2 years from now, if he takes chlorine out of the water, you're going to find many, many, many cases and cities who are experiencing extensive oral issues, particularly with their children. A major city in the north where they took chlorine out, somebody demanded they take the chlorine out, and now you're having dozens of lawsuits of the children impacted because of the oral disease brought on by the lack of chlorine. I'm not saying, because I don't know, I've never studied the impact of chlorine, but everything I've read, again from the scientists, say chlorine prevents tooth decay. So I'm just saying, I want those decisions made. I hope he at least surrounds himself with medical people, with well-trained doctors and physicians, epidemiologists, who he will listen to, because you can be the person at the top if you make informed decisions. If you just make informed decisions based on, the guy that's the Surgeon General in Florida, I'm trying to remember his name right now, but they hired him off this. There was this very right-wing, white-ring theorist group that he came from, because he was such an anti-vaxxer. It's just interesting that people on one side believe it's terrible and people on the other side believe that it's good. And I don't know, never the twain shall meet, I think.
That's another one where it's like, who do you trust?
Right.
I know briefly, and I'll try to get my dates right. It used to be that a drug company could be sued if they put out a vaccine that caused injury. I think in 2018 or thereabouts, a law was passed that held all drug companies immune from defective vaccines. And so then you saw the number of vaccines skyrocket, and every company out there could just dump vaccines into the mix, and went from like 6 to 40 something because they were immune. They didn't, the testing and the carefulness and oversight wasn't as necessary because somehow they got immunity. So there again, this is a big debate. I have two.
So I would challenge you on that in terms of if we're talking about broad vaccines, not COVID vaccines, right? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, listen, I think there are issues certainly with big pharma. There's no question about that. And I think that now if the president goes in and does something about big pharma, the new president, then power to him, because he's talking about shaking up a whole lot of things, and some of them are good. We'll see. I know our deficit is just his deficit went up higher than anybody's, and that's still an issue. I think we're don't care nearly enough about our environment. It's gonna be interesting to see the impact of the tariffs. But yeah, big pharma, I'd love to see something done with big pharma.
I want to note, and you can respond and disagree with me. As far as RFK goes, I am a fan. He has been vaccinated, and it's my understanding his family has too. I don't think he's anti-vax. I think he's anti-mandate, and he's pushing for just carefulness. Like, let's just know what we're putting in our bodies, and make sure the parents understand too. That
I can go with that. It's interesting that virtually all of his family disagrees with him.
It's funny. My mother says the same thing. She's like, "Well, Matt, everybody in his family disagrees." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know whether they disagree or not." When I hear him talk about Ukraine, or when I hear him talk about the medicine, or when he wrote the book about Dr. Fauci, it seems to be well laid foundations for his idea. But certainly, yeah, he has attracted controversy and some debate over his views.
Yes, and then Mehmet Oz is similar. I know that the gentleman taking over at the CDC is certainly of that same vein. So it'll be interesting, So do you agree, Matt, that the president should be able to insist on an oath of loyalty, not to the Constitution, not to the flag, but to himself?
Well, I agree with what he's doing. Appointing, when you burn like Trump, I don't know if I'm answering your question or if I'm digressing, but when you were burned like Trump back in 2016, you're impeached, you appoint bad people that you get bad advice from. They try to sue you and put you in jail on 4 different indictment cases. It's like, the attack was nuts. So I understand this desire or the absolute desperation to get people that are going to be loyal, that are not going to be stabbing you in the back.
But couldn't you just do that with your appointees? Do you need to go? I mean, I'm talking about career people. You're going into career people so do you disadvantage, or do you penalize the career employees, many who've been there years and years, and then the foundation who have to be there from like me? I mean, I had to work for Democrats, for Republicans. I had to switch from a policy standpoint. So do you penalize them when you have thousands of political appointees that you get to pick already? The problem was he didn't make the right pick.
Right. Well, I mean, I remember he's asked, like, what do you do on your first day, Mr. Trump? Like, what is it like? And it's interesting. There's no course that you take on, okay, well, this department's here, and this department's here, and this guy does this, and this is like, you just go in, it's nuts, really, to think that somebody is supposed to take that role on and immediately have an understanding about how to run it all. And so, he stepped in and got some. So I would argue some pretty bad advice, and he had not he didn't have the lawyer group around him. Let me make sure I understand your question. You're saying, is it fair for him to put in his appointees and get rid of the career? What was your question again?
Yeah, no. So he has a mandate in the sense, you control the Senate, the House, you're the president. Hey, you have the ability and the right to pick anybody you want to, prioritize any policies you want to. Absolutely. And, we'll see what we get. But he's radically going to change the government when you go in and tell career staff people that you now have to sign a pledge of loyalty. I'm telling you, these are people who were there like me. You may have been there 3 administrations ago, and now you have to sign a pledge of loyalty to him, not to the government, which we all have to swear a pledge of allegiance to the government, but not to an individual. And I'm just saying that's a radical change, Matt. This country we've never had that before.
So he's making them sign a pledge of loyalty to him. Everybody?
Yes. No, not everybody, but in certain places they're not political appointees. These are career people, though. And so the goal, honestly, is to get them to leave, and then he can replace them with his people. And I just have some concerns about that.
I get you. I feel you. That's a good question. It probably could change based on my latest YouTube view or something. Based on what opinion I've heard lately. To give you a response, I honestly would agree with that. If they're not violating the law of the Constitution. Now, if Trump says, sign a pledge of loyalty to me. All right, good. Thank you for signing that. Now I want you to go launder this money and hide it over here in this account, blah, blah, blah. That's crazy. But to expel...
Why would they need to sign a pledge of loyalty to him? I never had to do that before with any other president. Why should he be able to demand that?
I don't know if you should. When you've been attacked like that, and they're trying to put him in jail for life because he wanted to be president. I'd be crazy. I know, like Stalin went nuts and killed everybody because he didn't trust everybody. So it shouldn't get to that, of course. But when I see the amount of undermining and scheming, it's like, gee, it's nuts. So you have to be loyal to me.
That's interesting. Because every one of his appointees should be loyal to him, because that's your inner circle. That's who you trust, and that's who, will do. Hell, they'll fall on the sword for you. I'm okay with that, because that's part of being a political appointee. But the other people didn't sign up for that.
Well, if they should automatically do it, they should be able to put it in writing, right? I mean, I guess if I let's say you and one of your companies, because you've been part of some large organizations, I have much smaller organizations, but I would like to know that people are going to be on board with my vision.
And I think that makes sense, particularly in a private industry. I agree with you in a private industry. If you don't believe in this, you don't believe in what you're doing, you don't need to work here. But government is a little different, especially in a democratic republic. That's what we have, right?
Well, I don't know. I would say they should be loyal. Should they sign something? I kind of like the idea. Although, I know he's been compared to Hitler and fascism and all that kind of stuff, and this does appear like he's manifesting those characteristics. But I would like to know, all right, we're going to change this. We're going to do something great. I got to know everybody's on board. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, well, listen, my friend, I have enjoyed this conversation. I hope I didn't say anything that you too strongly disagree with.
No, you know what? I'm with you in that it is important that people who come from different perspectives should be able to sit down, respectfully listen to each other, and, respectfully sometimes agree to disagree. And so I love the fact this has been a very civil conversation. You've let me put my perspective out there. You shared yours. I think there's some positive in going both ways. And that's, to me, the way you live life. We always have to be open to learning new things and meeting new people. And I appreciate the invite, Matt. And hopefully you'll let me make a plug on my new book. It's been out a month. It's called The Longest 4 Years of My Life, A View from the Field by a Black Fed in the Trump Administration. and it is on, you can go to Amazon and get it, and order my website where you can find out more about me, which is my name, DericGillard.com.
Hey, spell Gilliard for us if you don't mind.
Gilliard.
Okay, just like it sounds. All right, and we'll put that in the comments section in the notes too.
Fantastic.
Well, congratulations. When did you finish your book?
Like October 1st.
Congrats.
Yeah, it's real new. Yeah, it's real new. The subtitle is A View from the Field by a Black Fed in the Trump Administration.
All right, well, I will check out your book, Mr. Gilliard, and let you know what I think. But I have, again, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed it. That was a great debate, great information from both sides. So it's been another Hines on Air. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, leave us comments, and click the like. And please join us next time. We've enjoyed having you.
Hines on Air is for you. Remember to subscribe, like, and leave a review whenever you listen to podcasts. Your support helps us reach more people and continue sharing these incredible stories.